Hold on tight for the next hour. You're entering into a place, a zone called the alternative to the alternative media. It's a place, a special place where even truth seekers fear to tread.
All right, people, let's move like we've got a purpose.
Affirmative.
Okay, glad you're back on the Investigative Journal on this Thursday, May 25th, 2017, day on our calendar. To be honest with you, yesterday I said I was not going to be doing a show because I'm going on a little vacation for a few days. And I'm going to squeeze this in because I got an email that's so interesting I can't pass it up. And then somebody emailed me and said, where do you go on vacations? Well, let me tell you, I don't go on many. And my budget doesn't allow me to do a whirlwind tour around the world. But that brings up an interesting point. When I was young, I wanted to see every place in the world. I remember I was working as a journalist in St. Louis, and I said, I got to get to Europe. I got to get over there to the eastern part of the Europe as well. I got to go. I got to see everything. And you know, that to me really paid dividends, because I don't think the things I report on, you can report better if you've actually been there, seen it. Rome is a good example, and I've spent a lot of time talking about Rome, but I've been there, I've seen it, I've lived it, I've walked every cobblestone in that town. I've seen everything from a point of view that, you know something, I'm glad I felt that way when I was young. And now that you get into the twilight period of your life, you reflect on those things. And it always is interesting. Did you ever think what you really wanted to be when you were a young kid, and how different are you now? I'll tell you, I'm 180 degrees different. When I was a young kid, from the time I can remember walking, I had a baseball mitt in my hand. And in fact, I still wore my Cubs hat. And I wanted to be a baseball player. And it is so hilarious what I turned out to be, because I look back and I go, my God, I wish I would have been a baseball player. But anyway, you know what, I may do a show on that in the future. But, you know, look back and see what you were thinking about when you were young and what you wanted to be. Did you have a passion? You know something? Passion is something that switches as your life goes. I was a young kid. I remember this with a passion. I mean, I remember that I used to catch 300 ground balls every day. If I couldn't have somebody hit them to me, I'd do it off a wall. I had a passion, and I was a pretty darn good ball player. And, you know, then my passion switched to journalism, but the same passion was in me. I was no different as a journalist than I was as a ball player. It was just something different. And now that I'm older, and I chose this kind of weird story that's kind of like leaves you in isolation. You know, I sit here today sometimes and I go, wow, I mean, if you want to get at the truth, you're not going to, listen, let's put it this way. Journalism, which I chose, I couldn't get a job in mainstream journalism. All they do is Google and see what I'm writing about, and they would realize they couldn't hire me. And so you're isolated there. Then in your personal life, you're isolated because everybody thinks you're a bit crazy. And so you become isolated when you get to the truth. And it's really sad sometimes. And people wondered, you know, why would you do this? But it's the same passion that I had when I said, man, I'm going to catch 300 ground balls a day. It's the same passion that I had when I said, I am going to be playing every first string on that football team, even though I wasn't big at all. And you know something? I played on a high school football team that never lost a game. 4 years we played and never lost a game. It's the only graduating team in the school's history, Notre Dame High School in Chicago or Niles, Illinois. You can look it up. And then this is an interesting story. Let me tell you a little bit about passion. And that team I played as a guard, if you know anything about football, you got to be pretty tough to play in the line. And I wasn't big at all. I was 5'9", and I lifted weights. In fact, I didn't even go to my senior prom because I was in the weight room. And I built myself up to like 200 and 190 pounds of muscle. But at the end of my career in high school, I had decided, for some reason, I want to be, I was thinking about playing baseball again, but then all of a sudden I get this scholarship and I go to a school. And the only reason I went there was because I needed, I didn't have much money and I didn't want to put the burden of school on my dad, so I went to the school. I wanted to play baseball, but ended up in the football program. And as I got there, I told the coach, I said, I don't want to be a lineman anymore. He said, what are you talking about? I said, and he looked at me and he says, yeah, how come you're down to like 170 pounds? You look 30 pounds lighter than when we recruited you. I said, well, I don't want to be a lineman. And I said, I want to be a running back. And he said, had you ever played that? I said, well, I did when I was a little kid out in the backfield, when we were out in the backfield playing. I think I can do it. He said, okay, I'll give you a shot. So they put me, I remember this, I was a freshman, and they put me in the backfield. Well, they said, go run back a kickoff, see if you can run at all. So they kicked the ball off in practice, and I ran it back for a touchdown. After that, he put me at halfback. I was the starting halfback for the football team. And I had a 4-year scholarship, and then at the end of that, I didn't know what the heck I was going to do. So what I did then was I decided, I like to write. And I put my same passion into writing, became the editor of my newspaper in school, spent an extra 1.5 years there to get a journalism degree, or we called it a mass communications degree. And then I went off and got a job as a journalist. And the rest is history. So it's passion. And what's your passion? And my life right now, I'm looking for that passion again. And you'll find it someday. You always will. And it's important that you put the same passion. For example, maybe I put the same passion into God, which I didn't think about for most of my life. And He always will have an answer. But the reason so going on this vacation, people ask me, where are you going? Well, I'm going to Mexico for a few days for the holidays because they don't celebrate Memorial Day there. And going to a place called Ensenada. And I have a friend over there. I'm going to spend a few days and enjoy, go do a little fishing, and eat some good food. But anyway, that's what I'm doing. A very, cheap vacation. But anyway, maybe I'll do a show from there. I'll bring my computer. But anyway, the reason I'm doing this show is somebody sent me an email. Really important email. Because it talks about the same thing I was talking about. Isolation. Somebody who finds out the truth and is isolated. Now, I was sent this by a good friend. She travels all over the world. And I've met her 10, 15 years ago doing a story about her. And she started traveling all over. And I think she's in China now. Not China, India. And she sent me this. She's not a Christian at all. She's not a Christian, but she says this to me. Greg, read this because I know how you feel. I'm not a literalist Christian, as is the author, but the blog is accurate and quite touching. And so she sends me this about this woman, this girl, who is searching, she feels so lonely, so alone because she's searching for the truth. She found God. And she says this, she sent the email with pictures and words, and it's really good. And I thought I'd read it to you because maybe a lot of you who have found the truth, whether it be through the secular world and finding God or through, having that feeling when you were young and then from understanding the secular world. But she sends a picture of the guy who did the Twilight Zone and says, if you will imagine a world run by an elite gang of psychopathic devil worshippers that want us all dead, welcome to the New World Order. To my friends who can see, there is a giant eyeball floating above an Egyptian, she sends the picture, Egyptian pyramid, printed on our money. And yet, people still think the Illuminati are a myth. And she sends this out. She wrote it April 4th, 2016, not long ago. Almost all of the people I know in real life have blocked or unfriended me on Facebook, as well as in reality. I don't hold back, though. I'm so interested in and passionate about things. See that passion? She has this passion here. I see happening that I finally crossed the threshold to where the truth matters more to me than what anyone thinks of me. And boy, is that a freeing feeling. Not that I have paid a heavy price for it, though. Socially, that is. But I'd much rather be alone than in a shallow company of people who are anyways. So it doesn't bother me much. And she goes on to say, almost all of my Facebook friends who have become real friends over the years are people I've never met. And may I comment on this? You know something, when you get into this internet world, I know what she means. I've striven myself to get to the truth, and most of my friends, I've never met them. Now, I have some friends out in the world that know me, but we don't get into this discussion, and we basically talk small talk. You know, how's your day? Things like that. And about a year ago, she says, one of my best friends from high school tried to have a talk with me saying, so what's going on with you? A lot of people have been telling me they're concerned about me because of my Facebook posts. I couldn't help but laugh at her genuine concern. Just wow. Every day is just so bizarre. Knowing and seeing these things plain as day and watching those right next to you see absolutely nothing. I didn't even bother trying to explain. I knew by now that I was a lost cause, so I just replied totally deadpan serious. It's not my fault everyone's brainwashed. The look she got on her face, ooh. She's a liberal, you see, who lives in San Francisco. Makes me laugh when I think back to it. I told her, someday I'll seem like the most brilliant person in the world. And she shook her head at me, rolling her eyes as they always do, and walked away. In the 60s, John Todd, one of the early Illuminati whistleblowers, said something in one of his lectures that really stuck with me. It spoke to me because it's what happened to me, and I believe it to be true with all my heart. He said this, anyone who studies this stuff, the Illuminati, the Federal Reserve, the political side, the elite, Hollywood, all of it, anyone who goes really deep finds God in the end, the Bible and Jesus, Christ. It's all about Him. It's a war on Him. Wow. I'm telling you, I fall into that category too, because that's how I found my way, and I found it through understanding all those things above. And she goes on to say, and there it is, folks. That's what it all boils down to. It's such a profound statement because it's so true. I truly believe that we are the last generation and that Jesus Christ will probably return within our lifetimes, and that Satan knows he has but a short time, so he's pulling out all the stops. He has been held back until now from destroying the earth, but we are about to witness the grand finale, and it's going to be epic. It's a spiritual whirlwind, folks, cloaked in deception, a battle more important than any before it in history of the world. And we have been specifically chosen to be part of it. Our actions during it will echo in eternity, and the implications of it are more important than we could ever possibly comprehend. We are the children of the end, and the true reality of what's going on smashes fiction any day of the week. And that's why this is all so fascinating to me. Only Jesus Christ can free you from the New World Order. And when Obama appeared on the scene in 2008 campaigning for president, I had an immediate and almost physical aversion to him. I never cared about or knew anything about politics until that man stepped onto the scene. I was 28 years old in 2008, and up until that point, I'd been too busy partying to give any thought to politics or world affairs. But the appearance of Obama on the scene changed that for me, because of the unexpected physical reaction I found myself having to him. I've learned from experience that my gut feeling is always spot on, and I had never had such a reaction like this to someone I barely knew. Something was up. And then she presents a picture of Obama dressed as the Pope saying, "Thou shalt finance my Holocaust." And papal bull from Pope, and this is what papal bull from Pope she says papal bull from Pope Henius the Great. I'll never forget the first time I saw him give a campaign speech on TV. I had to check the time here. I'm lost in this. But anyway, she says, I never forget the time I saw him give a campaign speech on TV. I can't explain why or how I knew, but the hair stood up on the back of my neck, and I knew he was evil and here to destroy our country. I knew nothing about the Illuminati or New World Order at the time. I thought he must be the Antichrist. It blew me away how no one around me could feel what I felt when I saw him. And let me say to this young lady that I've showed many times how Obama has tried to destroy this country and basically create this Muslim conflict and bring in ISIS to, create the huge conflict that's about to happen. And then she sends a picture of a big road sign that says, "Welcome to Nobody Cares, population 7 billion. And then there's a picture of the earth in the back. I started trying to warn all of my family and friends. I did that too. And I tell you, many of them won't talk to me now, begging them not to vote for him. I didn't do it about Obama. I did it about the Vatican years ago. I'm a bit older than this young woman. I became almost obsessed with it. Everyone got mad at me. I remember, I felt the same way. Mad at me, telling me to calm down and shut up. Then she sends a picture. Well, I won't read it. It's about Obama. The day Obama was inaugurated to the presidency on the 21st, 2009, January, I was in an inpatient woman's rehab site right outside of San Francisco in Marin trying to get off opiates. And the counselors who ran the rehab were all liberals. They canceled all of my activities that day so we could watch the inauguration and celebrate the first black president. All the girls excitedly gathered around the TV to watch. At first I tried to sit with them, but it quickly became unbearable. I had the same emotions one might have watching the execution of a loved one. I was nauseous and I felt like throwing up. I left the celebration to go to be alone, and I was expecting to be so physically affected. I wasn't expected to be physically affected like this. I remember it was raining and gray, and how appropriate that felt on that day like today. It was as though the heavens were crying. I was so heavy and sad. I distinctly felt a shift in the spiritual realm that day, and I knew that everything would be different from that day forward. I even saved that day's San Francisco Chronicle. I knew that one day this headline would be prophetic. I still have it. Here's a picture of it. San Francisco Chronicle, Wednesday, January 21st, 2009. Quote, "The world has changed." The inauguration of Barack Obama. So when Obama was elected, I knew without a doubt that we were in the end times. I felt it so strongly in my spirit. I had always been fascinated with the book of Revelation as a child. I was always drawn to that book. And I remember combing through every detail as a little girl, trying to figure out the meaning and imagining what those times would be like. I've heard many others say they too have always had something inside of them that knew there was something big was going to happen in their lifetime, that they would be a part of. In college, I was living abroad in Madrid when Tim LaHaye's Left Behind book came out, and I read through the entire series on my long rides to work and school on the metro. They fascinated me. I even went and visited the Vatican, and Pope John Paul II happened to give a mass the day I was there. He rode within feet of me, waving to the crowd in his bulletproof, encased Pope-mobile, and I remember feeling like I was living out one of the scenes in the Left Behind series. This was the year 2001. I was only 20, and back then I was not aware of how evil the Catholic system was at the very top, but I do distinctly remember touring the Vatican and noticing that I didn't feel good there. It reminded me of Vegas, where all the air feels thick and suffocating. It's the oppressive feeling of a major demonic activity. And so when Obama was elected, let me check the time. Okay, we got about 6 minutes. So when Obama was elected, I thought he might be the Antichrist. And I don't think so anymore because of how everyone was so enamored with him. It was hard to find anyone else who sensed this man's evil who felt like I did. I had only one friend, another Christian man at my work who felt the same way, who I could talk to. The rest of my family and friends, many of them Christians, got mad at me, told me I was overreacting, I was racist, and to give Obama a chance. And then she goes on to say, so of course, with the appearance of this very obvious villain on the scene, I began paying attention, but I knew nothing then. I had no clue there were powers behind him. The Illuminati, the New World Order, weren't even on my radar. But that would soon change. My hunger for knowledge had begun, and I wanted to understand more. Believe it or not, she sends a picture of the Bible. This book is being played out right before our eyes, and the world doesn't even see it. And it's interesting, she says, looking back on my awakening and learning process, I see that I had to have been divinely guided. I randomly came across the information in almost perfect sequential order, as though God was running a lesson plan and bringing me the perfect info at the perfect time in the perfect order. He started out by showing me that aliens were demons. Wow, this is interesting. And let me make a comment here in the last few minutes, and then we'll finish up with this email. I remember back when I was unsure about a lot of things when I was reporting, and I did a story, and I had an idea that there were no such thing as aliens, and I had to interview somebody that was, had supposedly seen them, worked with them, and I found a guy named Charles Hall, and he was a military man back in the 60s, and he worked in White Sands in New Mexico, and he was a weather balloon man. At the time they put up weather balloons to figure out what the weather was going to be, and he gave this incredible story about how he met the tall whites, and I did that story, and it's interesting that it opened up many people coming and saying, oh yes, there are aliens, they're not aliens, they are aliens, there's not. But over the years, I finally learned that, the big alien hoax, may be used in the end times. But anyway, I digress. We only got a minute here. Excuse me. So let me finish up, just make this statement here. I'm going to go back to her for a minute. And she says, it's interesting, looking back on my awakening and learning process, I see that I had to have been divinely guided. And blah, blah, blah. He started out by showing me that aliens were demons, God. I ordered a book that I randomly came across that at the time just looked interesting called Unholy Communion by Joe Jordan and David Ruffino. Okay, so we're going to get back to what she's talking about. Her name's Laurel, by the way, and quite an interesting email, I think. And it's the reason I wanted to do this was maybe there's a lot of people out there who are in this position where they feel alone, and realize that there are a lot of people out there just like you, and don't feel alone because God is always by your side, and He will help you through the tough times, no matter what they are. So we'll be back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org. When it comes to prophecy today, much of the evangelical Christian world has their eyes on Israel, waiting and watching to see when the third temple will begin to be built. The plans are drawn, the Jewish people are eager. Most evangelical Christians today believe that the rapture will happen before the third temple is built. Hi, I'm Michael Eugene. I was taught that Daniel's 70th week was in the future. Is that really what the Bible teaches? Have we searched the scriptures and found this to be true? Why is it so important for a re-established Israel to build a third temple in Jerusalem? Is it necessary to build a temple on the same location already occupied by the Dome of the Rock? Is it necessary for sacrifices to take place in the temple on Temple Mount? Is there really a rapture followed by 7 years of tribulation? What is the New Testament temple? Can we identify history and prophecy? Who is the first beast in Revelation chapter 13? Who are the 7 kings in Revelation 17? I have asked all these questions, and I have found Nicholas Arthur's new book, When the Third Temple is Built, answers all these questions and more using Scripture to interpret Scripture. The Bible says that no prophecy of Scripture is of any private interpretation. Nicholas shows us in his new book, When the Third Temple is Built, how the Bible interprets prophecy and not man's private interpretation. Visit crosstheborder.org, C-R-O-S-S, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of Nicholas Arthur's new book titled When the Third Temple is Built. That's crosstheborder.org.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
The following program is labeled dangerous and off limits by the supreme Jesuit command. But stand tall, people. Listen up, and you may just learn something.
Oh, dear Lord Jesus, this ain't happening, man. This can't be happening, man. This isn't happening.
Okay, back for the second half hour of the Investigative Journal on this May 25th, 2017 day on our calendar. And so Laurel has now found out that aliens are actually demons. And she started reading this book, Unholy Communion, by Joe Jordan and David Ruffino. And she goes on to say, these two guys started researching alien abductions and spent several years interviewing thousands of people who had been abducted. They were not Christians when they started this research, but by the end of this project, they had become Christians. Just like every UFOologist and researcher who has ever done thorough research in this area, they soon discovered through their thousands of interviews that the only thing that has ever stopped an abduction in its tracks was the person calling upon Jesus Christ. Calling on His name made these beings flee immediately. You know, an interesting statement they made in their book was that every secular UFOologist knows this. It is a fact well known by many in the UFO community that Jesus' name is the only known thing to ever stop an abduction. Yet it's rarely spoken about because it doesn't fit their narrative, and so it is dismissed. Well, I'll be honest, I don't know much about this area, and so if you know anything, let me know, because I'm not sure. I've not followed the UFO demon research and have not read that book. But anyway, let's go on and see what she has to say. So aliens are demons, but of course, it made so much sense. They steal, kill, destroy. And she says this. She sends a picture of what's an alien, and she goes, I'm not going to stop wars, bring cures for cancer, take you to Zeta Reticuli, this planet, or be BFF. I'm demonic in origin, and I'm here to manipulate, lie, steal, possess, cheat, and do harm. I do not come in peace. I come in the name of Satan. Then I came across L.A. Marzulli. UFOs are real, burgeoning, and not going away. When I learned the real reason for Noah's flood, I'd been a pastor's daughter, had grown up in a church my whole life, so I was blown away when I found out the real reason God flooded the earth. Now, I don't know much about I never thought, let's see what she has to say. God hadn't destroyed every living thing on earth because people were really bad. He had sent the flood because Lucifer was about to wipe out his creation. Okay, those of you who read the Bible, let me know on that one. Wow, if they had actually taught us the truth in Sunday school about the Watchers, the giants, and just the real reason God had flooded the earth, Sunday school would have been so much more interesting. This is another area I'm not quite sure about, so anybody chime in if you have more knowledge on this subject than me. Then she says, I was amazed. The Bible came alive for me in a way I hadn't before. And things began to make so much more sense. Suddenly, the long, boring chapters, carefully chronicling genealogy, weren't so annoying anymore. The bloodline mattered. Why had this information been kept from us? Why was it considered unimportant by the churches? Had they missed the line in the Bible, as in the days of Noah, so shall it be the coming of the Son of Man? There is nothing new under the sun, and Satan is still up to his old schemes. The problem is that the churches now only teach a watered-down version of truth, and people will not be prepared for what's coming when their pastors are preaching generic self-help sermons every Sunday. And then she sends a picture of a pastor, I think. Yee, if pastors could stop yoking their churches up with the devil-worshipping government, that'd be great. And then she sends another picture with sheep, and then a dog jumping over a sheep. We live in a time where Satan doesn't even hide anymore, and you still don't see him. That's an interesting thought. Then I came across, now these guys, I've never, she goes in, like me, I remember there were times I didn't know what Alex Jones was about. I worked near him, and I found out he's on the other side, and I didn't know that until I spent a year or so working on those radio stations. My show was right after his for a while. And I don't know much. I know that there's been people that give me the idea that Steve Quayle and Doug Hagman are on the same side as Alex Jones, so you figure that one out. Then I came across Doug Hagman and Steve Quayle, who were both instrumental in introducing to me into a vast treasure trove of information. Really awesome watchmen. And I came across, she says, she then came across Alex Jones, like I did. The satanic rituals at Bohemian Grove, etc. That knocked my socks off and changed everything for me. I was the same way. But then I understood what Jones was all about. And how? Because I actually worked there. I actually was on his show many times. Because suddenly it all started coming together, because none of this ever makes any sense until you understand that all top world government leaders are occultists and are taking orders from the fallen one, and I'm going to add this fallen one, Satan, of course, and the Pope being the head of this as the representative of Satan. Then she sends a picture of Satan. The whole world is lying in the power of the wicked one. That's 1 John 5:19. All Christians know that Satan is considered the god of this world, and yet still seem to have a hard time believing that those in power are actually Satan worshippers. And then she sends a picture of the pyramid with the eye, disattached. And she says this: the Bible teaches in 2 Corinthians 4:4 that Satan is the god of this world. If you don't understand this, then you will never grasp the truth behind the workings of the New World Order. The devil ain't a lie, he's a liar. Okay. When I found out that the people in charge are Satan worshippers and what their goal is, I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me, especially because it made perfect sense. The whole picture came into focus. Suddenly, all at once, this was when my paradigm completely shattered, and I went through a period of mourning. Looking back, I think I went through the stages of grief over it. I was pregnant with my first and only child at the time, and I was mourning the loss of his future, wondering what kind of world I was bringing him into, what kind of things he was going to have to face. I was heartbroken. How was I supposed to raise him, to prepare him without taking away his hope? And then she sends a picture of a little boy and a mother. And the mommy, read me the story about Nibiru again. Okay. It took me about a year to process it all and move into the acceptance stage. Remember I did a show a long time ago about the grief and relating it to the same subject? You know, the stages of grief. And she says, okay, it took me about a year to process all this stuff and move into the acceptance stage. Today, my son, who's just turned 7, knows the basic truths, although I keep it light. Most importantly, he knows Jesus. But anyways, my main point was the looking back. I feel like all of this info was shown to me in just the perfect sequence, as though God was guiding me. Well, there's an old saying, and I'm adding this, God only gives you what you can handle. And when you hear the truth, you know it. Well, I feel like I do anyways. And since then, I've come across so many others like myself, thanks to the internet. But it always has been a persistent question in my mind. Why is it that so few Christians understand the bigger picture? And then she sends a picture of somebody looking at a book, and there's a quote, "The more you research, the crazier you sound to ignorant people." That's a good quote. And then she sends another picture of traffic in the big city, and there's a quote by Plato. "Those who are able to see beyond the shadows and lies of their culture will never be understood, let alone believed, by the masses." It really bothered me that more Christians couldn't see. My parents are amazing Christians, and both have a very close relationship with God, and they cultivate Him on a daily basis. Why couldn't they see? One day God gave me the answer, and I know it was from Him because of the way it came to me. He tends to answer me by striking me with a thought that hits me a certain way right in the gut, as though I'd always known the answer but just needed to remember it. And this one was a clear epiphany. The reason these people and even my parents can't see this stuff is not necessarily because they're not spiritually discerning, but because they weren't made to see it. God didn't create them with the type of personality to be interested in these things, if that makes any sense. Well, that's an interesting quote, and I am going to neither say yes or no on that quote, because that gets into a very interesting discussion, and I believe Calvinism would be involved in this, but let's go on. They have other gifts and callings serving here on His earthly kingdom. I think that those of us who are interested in deeply understanding this stuff seems to come to us naturally. Why? Are this the way because it's part of our calling? It's a natural desire and wisdom that God created in us because somehow it fits in with our ultimate mission will be here on earth in these end days. What the purpose is or will be exactly, I don't know. I have no idea, but I know it's real and that it's important. And yes, Christians need to understand the plans of the enemy. Some of us have been called to do just that, although it obviously not for everyone. Most can't handle it, and it just confuses them and puts them in fear. Confuses them and really puts them in fear. Where did I lost my way because I had to let my dog out. But anyway, I think that those who are interested deeply understand this stuff she says, and it puts them in fear. What's the purpose exactly? But it's important. And yes, Christians need to understand the plans of the enemy. I think I've read that, but some of us haven't been called. It's good to go over it again, to do it. Just that, although it's obviously not for everyone. Most can't handle it, and it just confuses them and puts them in fear. So my point is that it's really easy to get annoyed and frustrated with friends and family who seem totally clueless, especially when they resent us for it and it causes tension. But I guess we just have to remember that not all Christians are called to the same purpose, and that this knowledge, wisdom, discernment, whatever it is unique to us because we have a special calling. We will be warriors for Christ in a different way than most Christians. I look forward to finding out. And then she sends a little card with C.S. Lewis, a quote, "Now at last they were beginning Chapter 1 of the great story no one on earth has ever read, which goes on forever, in which every chapter is better than the one before it." We are living in one of the most important days on earth right now. Part of the reason it's all so interesting to me is just how bizarre and unbelievable this is. How they are able to pull this off and deceive on such a large scale. People, please tell me to stop focusing on the negative. But what they don't understand is that it doesn't affect me like that. I understand the bigger picture, and I know at the end of the day who is ultimately in control. I feel safe in knowing that Jesus Christ really did pay the price to redeem us, and that although we may still die a physical death, we will be restored to perfection and live His presence for eternity. Eternity is a very, very long time. And then she sends a picture of a horse running, saying, "The end, Yeshua wins." And then another quote by C.S. Lewis and a nice picture of a country road. "There are far, far better things ahead than any we leave behind." And this temporary reality we are living in, and the spiritual battle that is being played out on the world stage right now, is stranger than fiction. We have front row seats to a time in history that people have talked about, written about, thought about, and wondered about for thousands of years. I'm not going to apologize for being absolutely fascinated with what I see playing out in front of me in real time. Do you know how many theologians and men of faith would love to have witnessed these events in their lifetime in the past? To finally see how the mystery of these prophecies are going to be fulfilled. And then she sends a picture of clouds and says this, "The cry went out at midnight, behold, the bridegroom cometh, go ye out to meet him. And they all arose to trim their lamps." I understand that most people are not where I am, and that many can't see the whole picture, and that looking at this stuff puts them in fear and makes it too hard to function on a daily basis. I get it. Not only does it take faith in Jesus, belief in a spiritual war, and an understanding of prophecy, but it also takes a certain kind of right-brain personality, perhaps, to be able to connect the patterns and appreciate the intricate layers of complexity and intrigue that makes this entire thing so fascinating. And she sends a couple more pictures, and we won't read those. She does send one here. It's a nice picture of Jesus overlooking the lambs, and says, "Draw nigh to the shepherd precious one. Night is falling on the earth. Bloodthirsty wolves lurk all along the wayside. Now is not the time to stray." And she says, here's one of my favorite, see how much time I got, C.S. Lewis quotes. And I'll read this to you. "You may have noticed that the books you really love are bound together by a secret thread. You know very well what is the common quality that makes you love them, though you cannot put it into words, but most of your friends do not see it at all, and often wonder why, liking this, you should also like that. Again, you have stood before some landscape which seems to embody what you have been looking for all your life, and then turn to the friend at your side who appears to be seeing what you saw. But at the first words, a gulf yawns between you, and you realize that this landscape means something totally different to him, that he is pursuing an alien, a vision, and cares nothing for the ineffable suggestion by which you transport it. Even in your hobbies, has there not always been some secret attraction which the others are curiously ignorant of? Something not to be identified with, but always on the verge of breaking through. The smell of cut wood in the workshop, or the clap-clap of water against the boat's side. Are not all lifelong friendships born at the moment when at last you meet another human being who has some inkling, but faint and uncertain, even in the best, of that something which you were born desiring, and which beneath the flux of other desires, and in all the momentary silences between the louder passions night and day, year by year, from childhood to old age, you are looking for, watching for, listening for. You have never had it. All the things that have been deeply possessed your soul have been but hints of it, tantalizing glimpses, promises never quite fulfilled, echoes that died away just as they caught your ear. But if it should really become manifest, if there ever came an echo that did not die, away but swelled into the sound itself, you would know it. Beyond all possibility of doubt, you would say, "Quote, here at last is the thing I was made for." We cannot tell each other about it. It is the secret signature of each soul, the incommunicable and unappeasable want, the thing we desired before we met our wives or made our friends or chose our work, and which we shall still desire on our deathbeds, when in the mind no longer knows wife or friend or work. While we are, this is. If we lose this, we lose all. And that was C.S. Lewis, The Problem of Pain. Then she says this, from C.S. Lewis, what draws people to be friends is that they see the same truth. They share it. Thank you, she says, to all of you who made me feel appreciated and valued over these last few years by being interested in the things I post. You've helped keep me sane and encourage me in this twilight zone we find ourselves in. Because of you, I can be confident that I'm not crazy or out there like my real family and friends think of me. Then she sends a picture, and you see some lions. Walking in this truth, turn family into strangers and strangers into family. She says, I must end this with this amazing short film. And then I don't see where the film is. But anyway, if I find it, I'll let you know next time I'm on the air. And anyway, her name's Laurel. Quite an interesting email that was sent to me. And I wonder, I only got about 3 or 4 minutes here. I wonder what your thoughts are on this. And you know, I'm thinking how this affected me. It made me, what she had written, it made me think about a number of things. How I even came to be like I am today and understanding all this stuff. I never set out to do this. And there were a lot of things in my life, like she said, that I think God had put in place for me to get to this point. And I wonder if you thinking, you know, if you're out there listening, if the same thing has happened to you. And I also wonder, I really wonder, you know, I can't help it. As a journalist, I'm always looking for that best story, that scoop, so to speak. And I just keep thinking, when are we really living in the time where Christ is coming back? I know that every generation, I've read much in history, and every generation had its people who said that Christ was coming back during their generation. And you can't help but wonder if we are. So anyway, when you think back on your life, it's also important to think, why is this important to you? Not so much why people don't understand you, or why they don't want to hear about the Vatican as the Antichrist, the Book of Revelations, and what it really means. They don't want to hear anything. More or less, why do you want to get to the truth? And I'm not talking just about, I'm talking about the big picture, the truth of the big picture. What has led you to do that? Because it's a very, very difficult time. I enjoy it at times and laugh about it, but there are days that I just wonder. I mean, I've had days where I just go, I don't want to think about this stuff anymore. Just put me back on the baseball field. And usually when I feel like that, I turn on a Cubs game and still enjoy occasionally heading out to the ballpark. And although I'm not near Wrigley Field, I go to any ballpark that I'm near. I remember I used to go to a lot of Colorado Rocky games, and I go to San Diego Padre games, even though I don't like the Padres. And by the way, the Cubs are coming to town soon, so I may head out there. But the point I'm trying to make is, really think about, how it happened for you and where it's all going to, I guess. How's it going to play out? And I hope that through this, and I met so many people through searching for the truth, and my only regret is I wish everybody was like, within a handshake away instead of on the internet. And there's good and bad about that. You're always talking to people you've never met, but you really get to know them. And anyway, we're all out of time. And like I said, I'm going to take a few days to take a little short vacation, go do some fishing in Ensenada, Mexico, and hopefully catch a couple good fish. But anyway, have a good evening, and I'll see you maybe next week. I'm not sure, but sometime maybe after the holiday or when I get back. I'm only going to spend 3 or 4 days there, so have a good evening and good night.
The book of Revelation says, the spirit of prophecy is the testimony of Jesus Christ. This is at the very heart of FirstAmendmentRadio.com. In that spirit, we have created the Prophecy Reality News app for all of your mobile devices, streaming First Amendment Radio 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Available for your Apple, Android device, and smartphone, absolutely free. Get the Prophecy Reality News app installed today so you can listen to First Amendment Radio wherever you are. The Prophecy.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free 1-800-375-4188.